Hello, everyone, and I hope you're all well. My name is Tanner Dagenais, and I'm the host of Self-Sabotage Solutions. On this podcast, it's my opportunity and my pleasure to be able to share everything I know about self-sabotage, but also to be able to share other people's self-sabotage stories, because it's so important that we know that no matter who we are, where we come from, or what we've experienced in life, that we're all able to overcome self-sabotage. And so today I'm very excited because we have Freedom from Self-Sabotage Coach, wealth coach, and founder of the Man on Fire program, Bryce Cluett, on the line. Very excited to be able to hear more of his story and kind of actually hear what the Man on Fire program is. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Bryce. And can you just introduce yourself a bit, and then we can go into your story?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. It's great to connect with you and be a part of this self-sabotage series. Um, yeah, so my name is Bryce Cluett, and I'm Jason Christoph trained Freedom from Self-Sabotage Coach. And a little bit of my journey really started when I started eating healthy. Probably about 15 years ago or so, I started down that road of really questioning why I eat, what I'm putting in my body, and can it optimize my sort of daily activities. And so I started doing that. And something that I really started to notice, and not really at that time, but more in hindsight, that I sort of had this clarity. I started getting this clarity about myself, as to my intentions, and sort of conscious, became a lot more conscious. So I considered it to be conscious eating. People would say, oh, are you vegan, or are you paleo, or like they'd want to put a label on it. And really what it was I just started eating healthy and just watching what I put in my body. And it seemed to have created more of a consciousness around things that I did daily. So it started with the food, and then it started with other intentions in life. But I was still at that point just kind of going through the motions. I was eating healthy, but I was still going to my daily job and not really thinking about things, and still consuming the coffee, and still partaking in all those sort of self-sabotaging behaviors that the general public sort of take in, right? So that's kind of what started me on that journey. And I found that I started to critique what other people were doing just naturally. I'm kind of like that anyway, just kind of logical. Like, I'd go to the grocery store and I'd see all kinds of stuff in people's carts, and that's just what I was like. And I noticed it. Oh wow, they're eating those things, or they're doing that, or and so I sort of became a little bit, I guess, overcritical of like what was going on around me. And I found at that time it was kind of annoying to myself. I didn't really know why I was kind of noticing that, but I think I attribute some of it to, like I said, starting to eat healthy, and then starting to be a little more conscious. And we know when it comes back to, self-sabotage, when you're polluting your body with toxins, you sort of go into that flight or fight response, and you sort of want to follow the herd. Then subconsciously, you don't really know why you're doing it. But when your body's in that state of distress, it kind of just wants to do what everybody else around you is doing for safety. So I was on the other end of it, where eating healthy, I started noticing people around me started to, they started to pick at it and started to make kind of, I guess, make fun of what I was doing, or I could never eat what you eat, and I'm like, what do you mean, like food? Like, it's just food. It's just not your typical like boxed fast food, right? So, um, I still went through a lot of the self-sabotaging behaviors when I look back at it now. I did play music for a long time, so I was in that sort of band atmosphere. And I did partake in like weed smoking and stuff like that. So a lot of alcohol, and that was sort of, I guess, just fitting in with the people around you. So as I moved on and sort of started to really think about my actions more and more through life, that's when I discovered self-sabotage. And I'm grateful every day that I've discovered this sort of teachings that we all incorporate into our daily lives, and allows us to live with more intention. And that's probably the easiest way that I describe it to people is, it's not this big fancy thing. It's not this big, huge, long journey. It's just a daily thing that we live with, and we live with intention. We want to influence the people that we love around us. And so for myself, I have a little boy. I know you have a little boy. Congratulations on that. And so, that can transition us right into sort of the man on fire sort of stuff. Is I really thought that we need men to sort of really step up and really start to live with more purpose and more intentions. Take it a step further, living with children, whether you just have a newborn or you're somebody who has like a 12-year-old, 15-year-old, something like that. We really should be trying to give our best to them. We should be doing our best and leading by example. So that's what the Man on Fire, that's how it was, it was birthed, I guess, was I started to show up in my own life and I started to see the results. So I wanted to do that and bring that to the masses and bring it to men, specifically men, right? And we know that there's lots of the agenda, the attack on the male. I talk about that quite a bit. And I know some of our other coaches do as well. And, I try to somewhat just meet the client where I am. So I meet them where they are. Sometimes it's just a brief discussion of just sort of habits, even like habit stacking or daily habits, what you do. You have a choice in what you do every day. So whether you choose to, adapt an identity, that's probably the biggest thing that you can do to help change your habits is, just ask yourself, what would a healthy person do? If that's what you're trying to do, is just be a little bit healthier in your life, what would a healthy person do? Every time you go to eat something, just say that to yourself. And that repetition, that power of shifting that identity, eventually you're going to end up just doing what a healthy person does. Same idea. I mean, I use that analogy sometimes when I talk about people who smoke cigarettes. People try to quit and they try to chew the gum and they try to do all these different sort of elixirs to get rid of it. The whole time they're still identifying as a smoker who's trying to quit, right? And so if those people just sort of adapted the mentality of, no, I don't smoke. I'm not a smoker. And so when somebody offered them a cigarette, say, hey, you want a cigarette? And instead of them being like, no, I'm trying to quit, they would say, no, I don't smoke. And so then you start to, and the power of thought and the power of self-inner talk. And those little tiny things, I mean, I think that's what people can start to work on every day, is just to start, think about how you view yourself and what you say to yourself. And that's going to have a great outcome.
Yeah, I love that. That's an awesome story. And, I know I can relate on so many levels, like the healthy eating and the positive thinking. Like a big one for me was when, like, just public speaking in general, like I'd tell myself I was terrible at it. And, if you would have asked me like 5 years ago, would I be on a podcast? I was like, no way, I wouldn't be on this. You wouldn't catch me, anywhere near. But I changed my thinking and I was able to come on. So I think that is really, really important. And I like the way you're talking about how you just, the identity behind it. So like, people, it's so true. People identify themselves in like a certain way, and then you can't break free from that identity because that's who you are, right? And unless you change that belief, you're not going to be able to change it. So, very, I very much agree with that, and that's a great perspective. Now, with the when you were starting to eat healthy, what kind of foods were you eating before, and like how did you start making those changes to start eating healthy? I know you just started, being more conscious and being aware of it, but what did that kind of look like? Or if someone else is interested in doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I first started to look at what I was eating, it was more like, okay, the protein that I'm eating, the meat that I'm eating. So I sort of at that time, not knowingly, I sort of transitioned away a little bit from meat at that time. And it was a slow sort of transition where I just thought that I could probably look at getting protein from alternate sources. So it wasn't I can't eat this, I'm going to eat this. It was more like, okay, well, there's protein in red meat. There's also protein in beans. So I started incorporating, I guess, a lot more stuff that I didn't normally eat. So instead of having like a hamburger with red meat, I had a bean burger, mostly with beans and then onions, and using more of the sort of same sort of stuff you would eat, but incorporating those bigger pieces of protein. So tofu is another one that I hadn't eaten a lot of. So I started to transition to use that instead of the more animal-based protein. So it was a transition for me where, I sort of moved away from that. I stopped drinking cow's milk, and looking back at it now, realizing that, I've brought some of that stuff back, but I've brought back the more sort of organic grass-fed beef. Pork is something that I don't eat. I sort of just stopped eating that completely, and didn't really find that it had a place for me in my diet. So now I'm more organic, red meat. And of course, processed food is gone completely. So I sort of ate without any intention. So if I even think back and try to think about what I was eating, I find it hard to, because I'm not that person, right? Like,
Right.
what did I mean, I'm sure I ate cookies out of a box,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, basically whatever was around, whatever was accessible. So if I was giving someone advice, I would just say, try to look at what you're eating, why you're eating it. For men, we need to get protein. We need to look at our protein, our fats and carbohydrates, and just try to get the cleanest sources that you can. And I love, actually, you and Steve are doing those superfoods and stuff like that. I mean, for somebody who's not really sure what to do or how to start eating, incorporating superfoods like that, like a shake or something, is a great way to get those nutrients all in one sort of shot, right?
Yeah, it's a super convenient way, because so many people are like, I don't know what to buy. I can't find it at my store, or it's too expensive, and you can just have it shipped directly to your door, and you'll be able to have
Yeah.
highly nutritious, nutrient dense foods that you can just take on the go, like, wherever you want. So I found that's very helpful for me, and like everyone I provided it for. So yeah, it's fantastic, and I like the way you're talking about how, like, you actually like ask yourself like why you're eating the food, because so many of us are just eating it for like pleasure, right? We're just searching for like that satisfaction of like the dopamine fix. And when in all reality, right, we eat to survive. We eat for the nutrients so that our body can function correctly. And so many of us are running on fumes like nowadays, that we're just overloaded with toxins. So I think it's really important that we address what we eat if we're going to be able to overcome self-sabotage. Another thing I was thinking about was, you said you were like really into like smoking marijuana and drinking. And I know for a lot of people, and including myself, I struggled, like getting with alcohol. Like I would tell myself for days, like, I'm going to stop drinking. And then I'd find like a Coke and whiskey in my hand the next day. And then, I was able to give up alcohol, but I wouldn't give up marijuana for the longest time. So what do you think it was for you that you were able to overcome that? And did you find any of those struggles where you were trying to give it up, but you just kind of kept going back for a little while?
Yeah, another great question, of course. And yeah, like anytime that you're sort of transitioning away from something, people talk about, well, what can I replace it with? Or, so they're still looking for that habit, right? They're still looking for something to feed that almost pleasure, right? Instead of thinking, you don't need it, so it's no good for me. So sometimes people will take a little bit longer to transition. I did, pop was one thing that I did drink when I was younger. It's been a long time for me now. It's probably been close to 20 years that I haven't had any of that stuff. But when I stopped drinking that, then I couldn't really have, I couldn't have a rum and Coke, right? And so I did, at that time when I was drinking, I was trying to be more sophisticated, I guess. I'd have it on the rocks, or, I was looking into scotch and stuff like that. So I was really just trying to find, even though I wasn't really wanting to do it, I was trying to find a way to keep doing it. So I sort of just, I went cold turkey with that stuff. And looking back now, I wish I would have taken it step by step, because I wanted to see what that reaction was gonna cause to me, right? So I stopped coffee, weed, and alcohol pretty much all the same day.
Wow.
And I haven't looked back. So that's kind of where I went. And like I said, for each person, it's going to be different, but I sort of adapted that identity. I really told myself I'm not somebody who does that. And of course, with our inside knowledge, that we are sort of rabbit holes that we go down, I couldn't bring myself to sort of poison myself daily on purpose. So that for me was the combination of learning in the background made my habits really easy to change. And so it was easy for me to say, I'm not somebody who drinks alcohol because, I'm a 40-something-year-old man who's trying to build muscle. It affects my testosterone, and it has no use in my life. And so some of the stuff I stopped frequenting, places that you would go that you would drink, or standing fast in my convictions. If somebody was like, especially when you come into a party or around the holidays, the first thing somebody says is, what can I get you to drink? Right. And so I would take that as a challenge to be like, do you have any water? Even though I didn't even want water, you know what I mean? Like, so you got to kind of convince yourself that you're fitting in. People are going to want to fit in with you, right? You're the one now who's standing out and doing stuff that not everybody's doing. So you're sort of becoming interesting now. And instead of feeling like, oh, maybe I should just have one drink because then, everyone else is drinking, I took it as being a challenge to say, I'm going to be the only one that's not drinking because I know why I shouldn't drink, right?
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, once again, I got that clarity even further when I stopped those things, realizing that, some of the goals that I was trying to set, that I'd always say, I should do this, I should do that, I should work out, I should maybe read at night instead of watching a movie. Now became really easy for me to say, you know what, I'm gonna go do that, and I would go do it. And so that's where I am now in my life, is when I'm trying to set goals or have dreams that I want to obtain, I know working a little bit each day on those will get me there. And I don't question it. I don't say I should, and I don't procrastinate. So procrastination was something that I did do a lot of as well.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. Oh, were you done? Sorry about that.
no,
Okay.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think it's so important we look at like the words we're using, because just like you're talking about, like with should, like that's implying like I should, but I'm not going to, right? Another one I always talk about is like try, saying I'm going to try doing this. It's kind of like setting it up. So like, hey, if I fail, it's okay. I tried, right? You're not saying I'm going to do this. It's a big difference in it. Or like when people are trying to quit drinking alcohol and they say, no, I can't drink, I can't do this, I can't smoke, instead of saying I'm choosing not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's
Mm-hmm.
really what it is. Like if you want to stop drinking, you got to say you're choosing not to do this thing. You're choosing not to drink, you're choosing not to smoke. And I really like how you talked about how, like, getting the knowledge, because I think a big part of that is some people know something is wrong, maybe on some level, but they haven't really done the research, right? They haven't done the research to realize like how bad something is for them. And kind of brings me to something I want to talk about. So, you know, a big part I think of being able to make these changes is like associating pain with certain things and like taking away the pleasure aspect. So like, for a lot of people, they associate alcohol with like relaxation, having fun, and like it's my way to relax. So like they think of it as such a good thing, and they don't have like any pain associated. But then they think of all the good things with pain. So they think of like, oh, I want to work out. Oh, but that's so hard and that's so painful, and that's going to take all my energy, and it's just not fun. So it's so hard for them to make the changes because they're associating pain with all the things they want to do, and they're
Mm-hmm.
associating pleasure with all the things they want to stop, right? So like, a big part of that is getting that knowledge, like you were talking about, and then just changing your identity. So, so linking pain, once you get the knowledge, you can link pain with the things that should have the pain associated with it, like alcohol. Hey, I'm going to be waking up hungover all the time. I'm poisoning myself. It's a neurotoxin, right? Um, so yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a big aspect of it as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I tell people too, like, there are no good or bad habits. Habits serve you in some way. So if you're smoking or drinking, maybe that does relax you, right? That's the outcome. And that's when you're trying to form those habits, you're going to want to know what the outcome is. So smoking, people say, well, it calms my nerves, but they don't look a step further to say that, it's detrimental to your health, right? Or that your partner hates that you smoke, or that your kids are seeing you and they're going to pick up that habit. And people will always say, I don't want you to smoke. Don't do that. I smoke. I've been smoking for 20 years, but don't you smoke. And it's like you're trying to tell someone's subconscious what to do, and that ain't going to work, right? Their subconscious is going to constantly be seeing you like going to the store, hearing you, I got to go pick up my smokes, I got to go do that. So I think that's a good way to explain it to people, that there are no good or bad habits, but they serve you in some way. But if you can just look a step further to say, let's do something that serves me for a positive outcome instead of a negative outcome. So, shifting that identity is huge. And that's why people will be like, oh, I'm trying to quit. And that sometimes is just their conscious talking, because they're having the conversation with you like we are. We're using our conscious brain. And they'll say, yeah, I'm trying to quit. That's you trying to like overcome your subconscious. It's not going to work. It's way too powerful. So what you need to do is, I don't smoke, right? These strong affirmations, and we both do them, and our circle does them, where like you have on your whiteboard, I am enough, right? So someone who, is transitioning through a bad, what we would call, I guess, a bad habit that has a bad outcome, they just need to start little tiny baby steps with reframing how they look at the habit. Eventually they'll get to a point where it won't serve them in their new identity, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think you're so right about the habits that, or like these like bad habits, they all serve a purpose. Like, the addictions and things like that. They're there for a reason. They're not necessarily like the main problem, right? Like someone being addicted to alcohol, it's not like the alcohol is necessarily the problem. It's what they're covering up with the alcohol. Like maybe they have
Exactly.
an their life is terrible, or like they just hate their job or something like that, and they're drinking to get that relaxation. Or yeah, I know that's what I was doing. Like I'd get home from work and it's like I just want a Coke and whiskey, and I just go and drink it and then like sedate myself all day and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, I think that's a big thing too, is just like um addressing like, why are you doing this thing? Is it for the reason that you think it is, or is it because you're covering up something else that you are unhappy with? And that's kind of brings me to my question for you as well. So I think a big part of my change was getting clear minded and like going away from those drugs and like the sedations and the distractions, so I can actually focus on my pain, why I was where I was, and like how it actually made me feel to be where I was. Because
Mm-hmm.
like I used that as like a fuel, as like a motivation to be able to move forward. So did you have kind of like experience like that as well? Like once you took away like the when you went cold turkey on the coffee, the alcohol, and the marijuana all at the same time, did you really like have like a big realization, like, whoa, like I'm not where I want to be?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I
at
mean,
that point.
yeah, for sure. I mean, that's another great question, and it sort of brings back sort of what we're talking about, how when people are drinking and it's serving a purpose because it is sedating their pain. um all people have dreams. All people have, and may not have, active goals that they're trying to reach. But if somebody was to sit down and say, yeah, am I where I want to be? Am I in my life right now? Am I where I want to be? And most people can always say, no, I want to be a little wealthier, or I want to be a little more in shape. I want to have better relationships. I want some sort of divine sort of connection or higher self. Once they start to do those things, I find that those habits that aren't serving them should fall away, should just go away, and be a lot easier to get rid of. Whereas when somebody's having a shit life, pardon my language, and they're just, everything seems to be going wrong. They have a terrible negative attitude, and then they throw alcohol and drugs on top of it. They're really just in a spider web, and they just can never get out of it, right? But if they started to sit down and, I know we say things like, write out some goals. People, when I talk to people, I realize the amount of people that don't use a pen and paper to even write down anything is staggering, right? And so if somebody was to write down a 5-year plan to say, okay, I want to have a little more wealth, and then just write down 5 things that you could do daily that could work towards that. Start watching some podcasts, start reading some or listening to some audiobooks on wealth. Then go to another sort of goal that they want. They want to be in a little bit better shape. start following some YouTubers that are giving out information, because there's a lot of free information out there. I think when people start to sort of dissect what they're doing daily, those habits then will just sort of fall away. There's no place in that goal setting for smoking. There's no place in there for drinking. People associate in our society that celebration equals alcohol, or fun is alcohol. And that's really, I mean, that's put there on purpose, right? So, when we start to talk to people or clients, and we start to go a little bit deeper into why they're doing what they're doing, and people start to see, wow, I'm watching YouTube, or I'm watching Netflix shows every night, and they have alcohol in them. And then every day after work, I want to have some alcohol. Like, there's a connection there, right?
Yeah.
And so those simple sort of processes just eliminate what could be feeding the beast. And those things will I think they'll start to wash away, and people will start to forget those things that they did. And that's the way I look back at it now. Like, we look back at things we did, and like you said, with the public speaking, I mean, I've watched most of your podcasts right now, and I would never think that you had a fear of speaking, right? Same thing with, me eating, stuff out of a box mostly, or like a microwave is a good example. I mean, I don't even know the last time I used a microwave. I probably like 20 years ago. But there's people who live by heating up everything in the microwave, and even meals. Even when I go by those, go by the freezer section or something, and I see like a whole aisle full of like foods that you can cook in a microwave, not just heat up, I'm still blown away by that, right? And that shows you how your identity has shifted from that to what you are now. So, these sort of podcasts that you're doing should show people that there's so many of us out there that have adopted this into our life, and anybody can do this. It just starts with baby steps and intentions and identity shifts. And next thing you know, it's like a couple years later, and here we are, right?
Yeah, it's crazy to look back and kind of think back to where we used to be, or at least I know where I used to be, and I'm just like, it's a totally different, lifestyle. And that's exactly what you kind of got to do. You got to make these lifestyle changes, because a lot of people are like, I want to be healthy, but they're not willing to give up the things that are making them unhealthy. They're not willing to give up that junk food. They're not willing to, they're not willing to make those changes. Um,
Yeah.
but I kind of want to talk to you about like what you were talking about with like the television, and the different influences that we have on us. And you kind of alluded to this in your story, where you're talking about like how like your surroundings, those are very like impactful to you. And we know as self-sabotage coaches that doesn't matter if your surroundings are the people around you or the television shows that you're watching. So it's so important that we address like what we are watching. So I love how you provided those good examples of things that we could do instead. Did you used to watch a lot of television? Did you start cutting that out? And what did you replace it with?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I did watch TV sort of, I'll say passively. Like, growing up, the TV was always on. If there was somebody in the home, like, the TV was on. That's just the way it was. We watched a lot of sports, which in tune was a lot of commercials. We never had, recording devices or fast forward. So it was literally just, when I think back about it now, just sitting down, just right in front of that box, and just commercial, 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 and then the show or movie, and then commercial, commercial, commercial. So I find now, when I look back, and I have my son is totally aware of what's going on TV, and is very, he'll point out stuff on TV, right? So that's something that I love, that I can teach, and that's something that I do kind of teach in my Man on Fire program, is men need to be teaching what they know to their kids, and showing by leading, right? So yeah, I started replacing TV. I just started turning it off and not watching it. And I still felt drawn to it. It's like an energy, right? It's like, it's there, it should be on. I found in some places in the home where I would have one, I just removed it. And we still have a TV in the house because I watch YouTube. We watch some crypto stuff in the mornings, and so my news now is totally changed. There is no news in the house. It's crypto news or wealth based, um, or higher self stuff. That's really all it is, and it's funny because that transition, it is a fluid transition when you start to understand. I want to subject myself, if I want these things, I want to subject myself to everything that has to do with that. And so, yeah, just kind of replaced it with YouTube stuff. And I encourage anybody to, just go on YouTube and start typing in and searching for different channels. And some of them might not be good. Some of them you might start to watch and not be interested and just, unsubscribe from them. But that's, building that playlist is something that people should be doing now, instead of, putting on social media, hey guys, what's a good Netflix show to watch? When somebody says that, like I can literally see the time being wasted when I see somebody say that, like, what's a good show to watch? I'm like, obviously I'm not going to be too judgmental, but I'm also going to be real. You're literally saying to the world that you have nothing better to do than just sit down and just be programmed, right? So I encourage people to, same idea, try to adopt that identity of somebody who is wealthy, or somebody who is in shape, or somebody who wants better relationships. Just look for that stuff and start to surround yourself with it, and you'd be surprised at how quickly that can influence you.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a very good point you make with that. Um, yeah, I think so many people are, just they work all day, work the 5 to 9, and then they go home and just binge watch, Netflix or some TV show, and they're like, "How come my life's not changing?" And it's like, well, what did you do with your free time? Like, you have this much time, and you can use it however you wish, right? So we can choose to stay where we are, and that's kind of think I were like they're using that like television, that Netflix show to kind of distract themselves from like where they really are in life. That makes them feel better, right? It makes them go into like that fantasy world where they're not actually in their life; they're in the TV show or whatever, and it makes them feel better until they go to bed and they wake up and have to do the same thing over again. And they're like, I need it again.
Yeah.
So I think it is really important we kind of step away from the television. And yeah, I think it's a good point also you made, how like there's so many, like I think it was farther back in your story, you talk about like on the television, there's so much alcohol, like there's always alcohol or coffee or drugs or like broken relationships. And I think this has been getting worse with the television shows, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember like watching television shows when I was a kid, and it wasn't nearly on this level, and it just keeps going like darker and like just worse. Like the show's Shameless and stuff like that. It's just
Hmm.
like the worst example you can providing for yourself. And a lot of people just don't realize that they are actually like programming themselves, like, right, that's why it's called TV programming. And so I love the fact that you are explaining this to your kid as well, because that's something I plan on doing with my child. And that's a big reason why I started to make a lot of my changes. I mean, I was making changes before that, but it kind of gave me like a renewed passion and renewed like fire behind me, to just like be a good role model for my son. So I love the fact that you had this Man on Fire program. Really have been enjoying speaking with you and just kind of hearing your opinions on this. So if you had one kind of piece of advice, and I'm sure you probably talked about it a little bit, just like one general idea, or something that you want to leave the listeners with as far as making changes and overcoming self-sabotage in their life, what would you be sharing?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And I just want to touch too
Yeah.
on that point about, the negative influences that
Oh
we
yeah.
see in the TV. I find now that with a lot of the sort of drugs and marijuana stuff, they always have it in a comedy.
Oh yeah.
So it's
Mhm.
always seems to be in a comedy, right? And you have your Pineapple Express and those sort of movies where they're passing it off as just a casual thing that everybody should be doing. And here in Canada, our fearless leader made it legal to have, and it's literally on every corner. So you have coffee and weed on every corner here in Canada, and in some of the same places you have a daycare.
Mhm.
So it's crazy. But I mean, one real thing that I would that probably leave with people is, um, It was really the knowledge behind it is one thing that I found myself was it led me down a road where I just couldn't bring myself to keep doing the stuff when I know the knowledge behind it. So knowing that the TV is there to program you, or knowing that there's forces who, pay for the news, and they're totally in charge of what goes out on the news. And it helps you kind of to think in a logical sense. So I want people to start thinking more using their conscious brain. So if people were to sit back and be like, why these last 3 years or so, why didn't we have just being barraged with health stuff? Why aren't we being told, walk a kilometer a day, or, incorporate this sort of food into your diet, drink more water, get sunlight. Those are basic needs for us. And we're not showing that to the public, right? We're hiding that from the public, if anything. So that's where, when I start to have conversations with people now, one time I used to I felt like I was more judging and more coming from a place of judgment. Now I'm coming from a place of just questions. I'm coming from a place of, I would just ask somebody questions to be like, well, why are you doing that? Why do you think you're doing that? And what that does is it gets people to start to think with their conscious brain instead of their subconscious, because people are quick to, come up with excuses because that's their subconscious doing that. That's not their conscious. But when you start to, really be an active listener, and really just to sit back when somebody's describing something, and then for you to say, yeah, why do you find that you do that? And just leave it and let it sit with them. A lot of times people will come up with ideas where they're like, you know what? I don't know why I do that. And then that's your sort of opening to say, you know what? If you want to chat some more, I know why you're doing that. And that's where the education, we're educators too. I find that would be the biggest piece I would leave with somebody is, if you are interested in knowing how to build a good habit, or knowing how to level up your life a little bit, find out a little bit of information about self-sabotage, because most people don't even know what it is. But finding out what's influencing you, that makes it easier for you to start to commit to those better habits, instead of just being like, yeah, my wife doesn't want me to smoke cigarettes anymore, and then you're getting resentful. Whereas if you knew the agenda, if you knew that, cigarettes could easily be taken out of our society, instead they just up the price of them because they know that people want them. So they're just the government makes more money from it. Then that might light a little bit of a fire underneath you, right? And get you a little bit upset. And I think that's something that I try to do with the Man on Fire, is to get men fired up, to get them, they should be mad. They should be kind of pissed off that, they've been held down for so long, and that there is this agenda that starts even before you're born, even before conception, where, stuff from products that go on the woman's body and cosmetics are all affecting the testosterone. And I've had a bunch of studies that I've been reading about recently, knowing that the majority of miscarriages that are had are male babies. And I thought that was kind of interesting. There was a study that I was reading about it, that almost, a high majority of the miscarriages that women have are usually always male babies. And so it plays into the agenda of, controlling the masses, and affecting the males, and making the men less dominant. We have all those movements, the Me Too movement and the feminine movement. And I just find that stuff so fascinating to learn about, how real history is. And I think that that's something that, once somebody starts to understand that and see it, you can't unsee it. That's going to be your fuel to move forward.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a perfect explanation and great piece of advice, everyone, for listening. Do that research, and don't just trust like what I'm saying or what he's saying or what anyone on the internet's saying. Do research into multiple different, people, like the different sides of things, both, one side of an argument and the other side of the argument, the middle of the argument. Like, see what everyone's saying and then make your own conscious decision. Don't just trust the science, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
gotta think for yourself. And I think that's, so many people are just stuck in a point of just, oh, the guy in the white lab coat, or the government official said this is safe for me, or this is good for me to eat, so it must be good. And they just go on and take it as the truth. But
Yeah, and I
we
mean, when you realize then too, like, there's there's knowledgeable people out there in every facet, right? But when there's a school that's designed specifically for medical professionals to go to, and who controls the school, that's when you start to see, okay, I'm giving a lot of credibility to something that I don't know about. And I just recently had a conversation with somebody about the whole donating. And I asked them, I said, so why do you do that? And their answers were literally just searching and grasping at straws as to why they were donating. And I just got it out of them basically that, they donated to this sort of research just because it made them feel good. And they thought that was what they're supposed to do. And so I went a step further and sent them some information on sort of the foundation and who funds the foundation and where some of the money has been gone and some of the corruption. And then all of a sudden you see, okay, I made this decision subconsciously. I never ever looked into it. And that's all I want people to do is, like you said, just make your own decisions based on the information that you have. You'll find that life will be a lot more enjoyable. You'll start to make decisions that you think is best for you and your family, and not to fit in with the people around you that could care less about your outcome.
That's a fantastic point, talking about like who is the one behind, the organization, or like, a big part of it, like the scientific research, who's like for our, scientific, and for our, I guess, for our society, there's like someone who's always funding that scientific research, right? Like no one knows, like almost no one knows that the main people who are funding caffeine research is Pepsi and Coca-Cola, right? But of course, they're not going to be releasing studies that show it's caffeine's harmful. So yeah, I think it's really important that people use that knowledge and get educated, because in most situations, almost all situations, ignorance is not bliss. It's going to lead you down that dark path, or that path of, disease and illness and just being unhappy. So yeah, it's been fantastic speaking with you. And if someone is interested in kind of just, seeing your program or seeing more about you on social media, I'll put your links down below, but just quick for people on the podcast or someone who maybe not won't look at the links, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, my main sort of hub, it would be the brycecluett.com. That's my website, and people can get a hold of me there and can email me if they have questions. On Facebook as well, and Instagram, Bryce Cluett Coaching, can be reached on either of those platforms as well. And thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's always good to chat.
Yeah, of course. It's been my pleasure, and fantastic hearing your opinions on these things. And for all the listeners, like Bryce is a very smart man, and you can tell that he is a man on fire right now. Like he is rocking it, loving it, and just I love the example you're setting for your kids. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have to talk again soon.
For sure, Tanner. Thank you so much.